Hello, how's your day going? This week my special guest is Glenn Shorrock, the English-born Australian singer-songwriter, soloist and founding member of rock bands The Twilights, Axiom and Little River Band. If you're tuned in from outside of Australia, you may not have heard of the first two bands I mentioned, but I bet no matter where you live, you do know Little River Band. Little River enjoyed international success the world over, and for very good reason. Glenn's about to share stories from his 60-year-long musical journey, so I'll let him get on with it.
In context with the business that I've been in all my life, we were never meant to be here. It wasn't meant for old people. It was meant for young people. And here we find ourselves in a reverse situation. I'm thinking like my dad. He termed rock and roll as bash, bash, thump, thump, tuneless, flaming jungle music.
Tell us about how you grew up, Glenn Shorrock. I know that you came from the UK to Adelaide and settled in a suburb there called Elizabeth. Once you'd come, your mum took you back again before bringing you out one more time.
Yeah, well, that was just a family thing. She couldn't deal with the migrant hostel in Adelaide in the 1950s, 1954, when we got to Adelaide, and within a couple of weeks, the Adelaide Hills went up in flames, and you could see it burning, and it was 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Mum cried herself to sleep and cried when she woke up, and finally Dad said, all right, then take the kids back to England. I will fulfill the migration contract, which was a 2-year contract, and I'll come back then. And so we did. We went back to England, back the same way through the Suez Canal. And for me, it was a wonderful experience. You know, I'm still 11 years of age, and I've already had one 6-week journey, and now I'm doing another one.
Yeah, no school.
And no school, yes. And Mum just realised that she'd made a mistake. And so we slept back out again, thereby destroying and spending what was left of the Shorrock fortune, and had to start from square one again. We managed to finally get a place in Elizabeth, which at that time was a new suburb meant for newly arrivals. You could call it a detention centre in a way. But it was a great place to grow up. And of course, at the same time, we got that huge dollop of American culture, which changed all our lives until 1963.
Right. Is it true that your very first performance was in a church hall in Elizabeth in 1958?
Yeah, I was besotted with Elvis. You know, I tried to look like Elvis, talk like Elvis, sing like Elvis. I made a cardboard cutout guitar and wore my dad's sport jacket, which fashionably reached my knees. So I thought it looked like Eddie Cochran a bit. And I mimed to All Shook Up, Elvis's All Shook Up. The record player broke, and I just kept singing it. My girlfriends and my boyfriends said, you know, you sound good. And then I didn't think too much about it. I just carried on being a fan and a teenager until I left school. And then I worked in the Geological Mines Department, South Australia. And the two of the big things happened. Kennedy was assassinated, and that changed a lot of people's attitude to life in general. And I worked alongside Peter Knobloch, and he was in a vocal group called the Four Tone, and they used to sing with a Bill Haley type rock and roll band called the Penny Rockets. I started singing along with him, and he said, one of our guys is leaving, why don't you audition? And I did, and I got the job, Vest. But it didn't happen because the guy that left said, oh, I want to come back in again. And then I'm left deflated again. But I just said to my friends, why don't we sing? We started singing folk songs. Michael rowed the boat ashore, hallelujah, stuff like that.
That band became the Twilights. You started off calling yourself the Checkmates, didn't you?
Yes, but that lasted about 2 weeks. It was a vocal group. I came up with the name the Twilights. I wish I hadn't, but I did.
Why? Why do you say that?
That's such a puffy name. It didn't have any balls, you know, it was just Twilights.
What had inspired you to suggest that in the first place?
was a hot night. We were sort of practicing singing, the three of us, and it was a lovely evening. And I said, it's lovely. It's the best part of the day, the twilight. Ooh, Twilights. Okay, we'll do it. That name and that group developed, morphed into the six-piece group that people know from Adelaide. And that was the start of my real career, really.
You became incredibly successful as the Twilights. You had 8 consecutive hit singles. Did you ever expect that you'd take off like you did?
Yeah, I had confidence in myself and confidence in the group itself. I don't know what would have happened had the Beatles not come along. I think we may have faded into obscurity, really. The Beatles changed everything, much more than Presley did.
You also started writing your own stuff too, didn't you?
Yeah, we were the best cover band in the country for a while, but we gradually weaned Terry Britton, and Terry became our major songwriter.
You mentioned you came to Melbourne after winning the Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds, which was a pop music contest. And as winners of that contest, you won a trip to London, which took you across the sea again, yeah?
Again, yeah. That was a big fillip to our career moving along, especially getting on the boat in Melbourne. And here I go again. Now I'm 20, and here I'm off to England to be as famous as everybody else. Of course, it was a rude awakening. We dashed ourselves on the white cliffs of Dover and returned home with funny haircuts.
What happened there?
We decided to come back, basically. It was a mistake. We should have stayed and tried a bit harder, but we were all yearning for our girlfriends and our fan base that we'd worked so hard to get here in Australia. Had we stayed, we had a booking on Top of the Pops, for God's sake, and we didn't show up for that.
Wow. Eventually in 1969, you decided to disband.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
We weren't having any more hits, you know. We just felt we were running out of puff, and our band of brothers, such as it was, you know, we were a fellowship. So Terry went off with a new manager back to England. I should have gone with him. That's one of my regrets now.
So when that band split up, it didn't dash your hopes or desires to be part of a band, did it? Because the next one was just around the corner.
No, it did rock me. The Twilights splitting up. They were my mates, my family. I loved them.
How did Axiom come about then in 69?
At Ian Meldrum's place, at Molly's place. On a Saturday night, he would have a soiree, various bands and artists having finished their spots around Melbourne. I would convene at Ian's place and we'd drink frothy coffee. And he liked to bake, like fairy cakes and stuff like that.
For anybody listening who doesn't know the name Ian Molly Meldrum, he was the host of a national television show here in Australia called Countdown that millions of viewers used to gather around. I guess it was the UK's equivalent of Top of the Pops, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Go back to the party at Ian Meldrum's house that night where Axiom was born.
Yeah, Brian was there that night and he comes up to me and says,
Brian Cadd.
Brian Cadd, you want to form a band? I said, yeah, okay. Have you got any songs? He said, I've got Arkansas Grass. I said, I know you have, but have you got any songs? We just basically grabbed who was there and formed a band. Brian and I were heavily into the band. Second to the Beatles, they're my favourite band. Brian and I just wanted to have a band like that. But we came out with, Arkansas Grass was a pretty country song. And then Brian and Don wrote Little Ray of Sunshine, which was not like the band at all. It was a very commercially sounding record, and that became number one. And we still do it together now, years later.
Where did the name Axiom come from?
I thought that up. I don't know where it came up, but it just came up in my mind, or it was in the paper or in a book. I can't remember. Axiom. And it meant obvious truth. And I thought that was pretty cool for a band.
Unlike the Twilights.
Unlike the Twilights, it was a bit heavier.
Axiom, another band hugely successful. Now, if I say to you, did you expect that band to go as far as it did? I guess the answer to that's probably, yeah, I did too.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we had Brian Cadd from the group. He'd had the hits. writing with Don Moody, and Don was in the band.
It was a great time for music in this country, wasn't it? I guess it was a great time for music right around the world, but it was a
Yeah,
great time in Australia for music.
69 we're talking about, aren't we? Yeah, it was. There was a lot of work available. Discos and clubs were really popular then. Rock and roll in Australia had a real basis and a real big following of people. It wasn't just teenage girls. It was taken seriously. Not that teenage girls are not taken seriously. I took them very seriously.
Yeah. So if Axiom was flying so high, how come that band disbanded in 71?
And because Don Moody got sick a lot, Don left. Brian decided to go back to Australia. I was going through a divorce. I also had a guru and I was very mystical. So my attention was going that way. I wanted to be Om Shanti, Om Shanti.
Right. You and George Harrison.
Yeah, he was obviously an influence. Again, there they go again.
So you stayed in the UK?
Yeah, they all went back home or various places, leaving me high and dry again, and was writing songs in earnest. I wrote The Seeds of Help Is On Its Way and Statue of Liberty, and a few songs that made it into the LRB repertoire.
Glenn remained in the UK writing and pursuing his solo career. He joined the multinational progressive rock band Esperanto, and he started performing backup vocals for Cliff Richard. Glenn Shorrock was determined to make his mark. Never one to give up on a dream, he persisted in the UK until he received an offer that he simply couldn't refuse. Australia was calling him back.
I tried to be a solo artist, but that was difficult. I had to go and live outside of London in Surrey. I lived there by myself with my guitar and a black cat called Rastus. I was a hippie. I was right into it. Russell Morris was across the valley in another place, and he and I used to hang out and smoke dope and have a good time. And I had a little scooter, and it was a songwriting time.
Was that also the time you started doing backup vocals for Cliff Richard?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did get some gigs as a session singer. There was an Aussie mafia, we used to call it, that revolved around Peter Gormley, who was an Australian manager of Cliff Richard and the Shadows. And, I skirted around the outskirts of that, trying to say, I'm still here. I've got some songs, and they helped. Terry, meanwhile, was ahead of me. He'd formed a band called Quartet, and they were doing acoustic music. They were doing very beautiful Crosby, Stills and Nash-like songs, and I secretly wanted to be part of it, but I didn't push myself again.
Let's move on to Mississippi, because they were an Aussie rock band that was working in the UK at the time, and you came to their attention. You knew the guys already, and they've reached out for you, didn't they?
Yeah, I didn't know they were there. I knew that I'd been sent their early stuff that they had released in England. I knew Beeb from the Zoot, but that's all. And I knew they were managed by Glenn Wheatley, and they were falling apart as well. And Beeb and Graham and Derek, the drummer, wanted to form another band, and Glenn Wheatley suggested putting me in front of it.
If I can just back you up 1 second. So we're talking about Graham Goebel, who wrote most of the songs for Little River Band to come, Derek Pellicci, who was on drums for Little River Band, and Glenn Wheatley, who'd been the former bass guitarist for an Australian band called the Masters Apprentices.
Correct, yeah. There was a bit of continuity going on there, so I went back to Australia in October, and we put the band together late 74, early 75, and quickly got a contract because we had kudos and we had some experience in the whole game. But I didn't like Mississippi as a name, so I decided, having seen a road sign, we were down in Victoria on our way to a gig, and we passed a sign saying, Little River exit, 2 miles. And I thought, we're all in the car. I said, what about Little River? Sounds like a song, doesn't it? Little River Band. Nah, they didn't like it. Anyway, I won. And I won the title again.
I happen to know where Little River Exit is, and for anybody who doesn't, it's not the nicest part of Melbourne or Victoria, is it?
No, it's right near Lara and places like that. We could have been called the Geelong Band.
Yeah, you could have probably wouldn't have had as much traction. Little River
No.
Band worked for you though, as you said
Yeah,
that
but
they
that's right. There's a little river everywhere in the world, in the
yeah,
various countries, especially in America. There's plenty of those
right.
there. And Wheatley was aiming us at America, unbeknownst to us, who were still working on being a working band and getting a repertoire together and getting out on the road and doing our stuff.
He had big visions for Little River Band right from the
Yeah,
get-go.
yeah, pretty much. I think yes. Well, he'd had some experience in LA, co-managing the New Seekers, and he knew what we were doing, and he thought it was an American sounding band. So let's go there. As Brian said, Axiom should have stayed on that course as well, but we didn't.
It was the time, wasn't it, when Australian bands couldn't sound Australian, when everybody had to emulate either a UK band or an American sound. I think it came a little bit later where Australian bands started to write and sing about our own country and
Yeah.
sound Indigenous.
Oh yeah, I think we definitely sounded not Australian.
Yeah.
We were an American sounding band.
And you
You know,
had
you,
to be that
yeah,
to be successful there.
yeah, but Dingoes, Skyhawks, various other bands in Australia at that time did sound Australian. Their songs were constructed around social life in Australia itself.
But they didn't
So
have as
they,
big a success in the US
no,
as
but
you guys did.
no, but they deserved it. Dingo certainly tried hard at it. We used to see a lot of them in San Francisco. We've actually did a couple of gigs together with them.
Little River Band went on to become one of the most successful bands ever to come out of Australia. You were the first to achieve major commercial success in the US. I mean, you really wrote the rule book and set the way for a whole lot of bands to follow.
Yeah, we were touted as being the college band, the college music scene, and we were tailored for that. A lot of people thought we were British or whatever, but they didn't think we were Australian. There was one program director who was enamored with early Australian music. He plugged AC/DC and Little River Band both at the same time. We finally had a couple more college type hits. I'll Always Call Your Name was one of them. And then I wrote Help Is On Its Way, and that became our breakthrough AM market hit.
Australia and Australian voices hadn't become flavour of the day yet in the US. You were still paving the way for that. And your songwriting had obviously improved over the years. You were gaining in confidence with what you were writing, yeah?
Yes, I was also surrounding myself with writers in the same motivation who wrote really good songs. Graham Goble has written some beautiful songs. He is a songwriter. I'm a performer. I'm a seller of songs. And I've surrounded myself with guys that can write better songs than I can. Always Terry Britton, B. Birtles, Graham Goble, and I struggled along with my sort of 3-chord, folky, easy, accessible songs like Emma and Curiosity Killed It. Oh no, I didn't write that, did I? Reminiscing, I didn't write that, but that's indicative of how good Graham Goble is. That's a classic song.
Yeah. Glenn, what was it like for you getting the reception you were getting all around America at the time? That would have just blown your mind, wouldn't it?
It did. We didn't realize how good we were compared with the other American bands we were on stage with. We worked in early stages supporting the average white band, that were English, of course, Doobie Brothers. And they were good bands, but we were just as good as them. And we sounded as good as what the Americans were hearing on the radio. In fact, people would come up and say, how come you sound so much like your records? I said, well, whose records would you like to sound like? Wanted to sound like? No, we had a lot of credibility as being a good live band. And that gradually smoldered away. It didn't catch fire, but it certainly got us there.
Yeah, it sure did. Was it tough being on the road as much as you were through the States?
No, it's great. I loved it.
Every minute of it, huh?
Just about every minute. I filled every minute with what I could. Yeah, I really lived the part. I said, finally, I'm here. I'm in America. I got songs in the charts. I got girls. I got drugs. I got everything. I just devoured it. I wasn't nuts. I wasn't crazy. but I certainly enjoyed myself. And I enjoyed the touring scene with the buses and the road crews. It was good. We traversed America backwards and forwards for 7 years until things started to change.
Little River Band went on to become one of the most successful bands ever to come out of Australia and the first to achieve major commercial success in the United States. But the incredible harmonies that the group sung were no match for the disharmony that began to engulf its members. Following a world tour, frontman Glenn Shorrock abruptly left LRB in 1982, supposedly to focus on his solo career. When Glenn Shorrock left Little River Band, the public was told it had been his decision because he wanted to go it alone. His 1979 cover of Bobby Darin's hit Dream Lover was cited as being the first of what was to be many solo releases. Glenn says this couldn't have been further from the truth.
Well, I didn't leave. I was asked to leave.
Why?
Because I was a naughty boy and didn't have enough conviction of Graham Goble's quest for world superiority. He still thinks we were the Beatles. He and I didn't hit it off. He was still interested in making the band his band, playing his music, and B was his cohort, and I was the third songwriter in the group, and I was pretty much on my own. I didn't have a lot of clout. Reminiscing and those sort of Graham Goble songs, they're really good, but they don't rock. They don't have the roots feeling that I wanted. I would have taken the band down the country road a lot more than Graham wanted it. He wanted it more Beatles or Electric Light Orchestra. They said, we don't want to work with you anymore. Graham had already seduced John Farnham to join. So I attended a meeting and I was told that I'm no longer wanted. We're going to use John Farnham. So I, in my diplomatic fashion, told him to get and I'll do it myself. And I didn't.
Were you very hurt?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I bet you were.
There's no loyalty in that band. It's a swings and roundabouts. A revolving door. Still is, it's still working as Little River Band. There's no one I know in it. Oh, yeah, Wayne Nelson's the lead singer now. They don't have a lead singer. Wayne's their singer.
Yeah, right.
Wayne was a good friend of mine. But a lot of water has gone on under the Little River Bridge. And so it's the ghost still stalks me. The songs are still good. People want to hear those songs, and they want to hear me singing those songs, not John Farnham. And the Americans didn't want John Farnham. They wanted good old Glenn Shorrock, knockabout or whatever it was. So John left disillusioned as well. And then they decided after a bit of a hiatus to get me back in, and I rejoined with conditions. Well, that didn't work either. By then, the momentum had lost. And so I decided to go my own way. I was doing all sorts of other things during that time away from LRB. I produced and wrote a show called One for the Money, which was a review type send-up satirical show about pop music. And there was 3 episodes of that. 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. I didn't do Go Cat Go because we ran out of puff there. And I was doing a lot of solo work, just with my own band. Straight after leaving LRB, I garnered together a whole bunch of songs, and John Boylan, who had produced all the hits for LRB, became my producer. And we did an album called Villain of the Piece. I was really happy with it, but it didn't work. No one played it. So that died a death. Well, life's hard, isn't it? Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad.
You get swings and roundabouts, doesn't it? That's for sure.
Swings and failures, whatever, yeah.
Yeah. Glenn Shorrock, what about the naming rights to Little River Band? I've heard a few different stories about how you guys lost those naming rights, and I guess you'd probably be a little peeved off with the fact that you had done. But how did that happen? Was that a mistake?
Basically, yeah. They took the eye off the ball. Graham Goble and Glenn Wheatley signed the name We2, which was the company name of the trading name. They signed it off to somebody else.
We don't need to go into the whole
No, it's so
situation with
complicated.
it, but suffice to say that the original members of Little River Band couldn't use the name anymore, even when you came together, several years later.
Yeah, yeah, we wanted to do it again, but we weren't able to. The injunctions and all sorts of stuff, legal problems, and so we decided to give it a crack as Bertel Shorrock Goebel, and we put together a really hot band, but that didn't catch on. The Americans wanted the LRB sound again. There's so many things that happened and still are happening. I call it the ghost of LRB stalks me like Macbeth or something. They were very romantic about it.
Yeah.
I still sing those songs. I still sing Graham Goebel's Reminiscing and a couple of other songs that he's written. But I'm an entertainer. I don't rely just on writing really fantastic songs. I'm a good entertainer, and that's what I like to do. I like to make people laugh, and I like to make people cry. And Brian Cadd is similar to me, and we do well together. And I put shows together with Doug Parkinson, God rest his soul, and Wendy Matthews. The three of us went out on the road for a while. That sort of stuff I'm interested in, working with other people.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to say that I'm still in demand for the festival type shows that come along with Brian and Ross Wilson and Dale Braithwaite and Russell Morris.
Of course, all the top echelon of Australian performers, of course.
Yeah.
You released your autobiography, Now Where Was I, in 2018, and in 2020 you received an Order of Australia for your service as a singer-songwriter and entertainer. You're obviously happy with what you're doing now and the performances that you are putting together. Is there anything still on your bucket list that is unattained?
Yeah, I want to get back to America and sing to American audiences one more time. But the bastards won't let me. The legal thing, they put injunctions on me, but hell, I'm 80, I don't have the get up and go to do it all over again. I just wanted to sing to the American audiences. They like my singing, and I like singing to them. So yeah, I'd like to do that again. I'm remarried now. I've got a really strong lady behind me, and we've got plans for ourselves. We're going to do a lot more traveling, and as long as the phone rings every now and again, people offer me work, then I'll keep going. But I'm not going to get on that ladder anymore. I'm not going to get on the roundabout. I've had the golden ring, all that jargon about that sort of stuff. I've been there, I've done it, and it was great.
It sure was, and it still is, Glenn Shorrock. What an absolute delight to chat with you. I thank you so much for spending the time with us here, and thank you so much for the music. You've made a huge impact, not only to Australian music and culture, but right around the world, and people everywhere, I'm sure, would offer their congratulations and thanks.
That's very kind of you. Thanks a lot.
Glenn Shorrock was inducted into the Australian Recording Industry Association Hall of Fame in 1991. In 2004, the original members of LRB were inducted into the Hall of Fame as a band. They toured together until 2007. In 2016, Glenn released his first album in many years, called Rise Again. Glenn then picked up an Order of Australia in 2020, and today, at 80 years of age, I guess it's to be expected that he now suffers with a few health problems.
I'm restricted a bit now. I don't move around on stage much. I sit and sing. We're keeping it at bay with a lot of medication. Gosh, I take so many pills. I sound like a maraca. But I'm still... all my vitals are in check and working for me.
You're freaking awesome for 80.
I joke about it. I say I can't stop singing Dear Prudence.
Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the story of the Little River Band and Glenn Shorrock's incredible career. I'm looking forward to being back with you again same time next week. I'll see you then, okay? Bye now.